Vic Ferrari, welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Hey, Deirdre, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yes, glad to have you. I think we're going to have a good time today. And, Vic, I've interviewed tons of lawyers or former lawyers who
Ooh.
ended up being authors and written books, but never have I interviewed any cops who transitioned into authorship. So we'll get to that a little later on to find out how did you discover writing. But first, I want to let everybody know that you served faithfully to the North New York Department, uh, God, the
New
New
York City
York
Police
Police
Department?
Force, the New York Police Department for 20 years. So thank you, first of all, for your service. And that's just incredible. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine being a cop in a small town versus being in the leading city of the world.
Yeah, it was definitely a wild ride.
Well, wild ride, but I'm sure pretty dangerous ride as well.
It had its moments. I mean, it's one of those jobs where you can be bored and nothing's going on. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, when you least expect it, something just jumps out at you, or you have to respond to something that's quite dangerous and heavy.
Yes, 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 yes. And that I would think, and just as a sidebar, I would think that would play on a lot of the mental health on being a police officer. Like one minute you're, talking casually with other police officers or other people in your office, and then next thing you know, a huge emergency. You go from 0 to 1,000, like in the next minute. So, I can see that just that alone could be very stressful.
It can, but I mean, the New York City Police Department at any given time is between 30 and 35,000 members.
Mm.
So even if you didn't really know what you were getting yourself into through the
Mhm.
police academy and then field training, and now you're just a patrolman in a precinct, pretty early on, you figure out, okay, and you'll see people resign. They
Mhm.
just they
Mhm.
thought it was one thing and it's not for them. And then
Right.
the cops get broken down, believe it or not, into different categories, and you have the ones that'll do the bare minimum. Unfortunately, they'll come to work late, they'll leave early, they'll take the report, they're going to get there 5 minutes after something happened. Then you have the ones that are running around doing all the work, adrenaline junkies. I'd like to put myself in that category where
Yeah.
you took the job for, you knew what you signed up for,
Right.
and you enjoy it. It's not, unfortunately, there's people that go into a profession and they're miserable, and that goes across any type of job. I'm sure you go
Yeah.
to Department of Motor Vehicle and the clerk is less than enthusiastic handing you your plates, or less than sympathetic when you forgot that one piece of paperwork that
Yeah.
would have gotten you through this stage of the game. So
Right.
it boils down to personality types at the end of the day, of who does what in the police department.
Right. 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 Exactly. Well, how did you get into being a police officer? Was
I
it a
knew.
family thing?
Oh, no, no, no. My dad was a butcher. I knew by the age of 5 I wanted to become a policeman and later a detective. Growing up in New York City in the 70s and 80s, you had all these police shows about the New York City Police Department.
Yeah.
There was a police station not far from where I lived, and I would always hang around there and watch the cops coming and going and look in the police cars at the equipment. And I
God.
always tell the story. By age 10, I used to sneak into the local post office and steal FBI wanted posters off the wall and go around the neighborhood conducting manhunts. So picture a bunch of boys 10 years old with these stolen wanted posters going into a deli, and there's some poor construction worker getting a sandwich, and we're trying to link him to a homicide in Kansas City. So I knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? So by age 20, I took the exam. By 21, I went into the police academy and had a wild 20-year career.
That is so funny. That is so cute about stealing the FBI most wanted posters,
I had to
conducting
get
your
my foot
own
in the door.
manhunt. That is just really adorable. Wow. Well, to say this, my husband is from the Bronx, New
Me too.
York, and he grew up in the 70s in New York. And from the stories that he's told, the episodes that happened in the Bronx were not for nothing. To use a New York phrase, it was full on crookdom. And he speaks when we drive up to New York and drive through maybe the Bronx and some of the other boroughs, he'll say that's a chop shop or this and that. Now, so chop shops, tell us all about the chop shops. Because a lot of people, if you don't go to New York, if you don't live in New York, you don't know about these things. So let's talk about these chop shops and
Sure.
what that means and what's going through those places and how you busted a lot of these rings.
Sure. So my last 10 years with the New York City Police Department, I was a detective in the auto crime division, and we worked on everything from
Oh,
chop shops, stolen vehicles, garden variety car thieves, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, changing VIN numbers or cars for resale. So you got to remember, in the 90s, New York City was averaging over 150,000 stolen vehicles in the 5 boroughs.
ooh,
So it was like shooting fish in a barrel for a while. And if you
yeah.
had a computer in your car and you were punching plates, it was like going to a casino playing the slots. You'd get 3 bars and you were off to the races.
Right.
In the auto crime division, yes, we would pick off the garden variety car thief, but our mission was more to go after where the cars were going, to kind of stop the market for it. There's different types of
Right.
chop shops. So you have, back in the old days, you had a lot of the junkyards in Hunts Point and out in Brooklyn. Some of them were mob controlled, and they were legitimate businesses. They were licensed with the state of New York. And in theory, you had an old clunker you didn't want anymore. You'd bring it to a salvage yard. You'd sign your title over to that person, and he would take the
Oh,
car apart into pieces.
okay.
And, body shops or someone else has a car that's got a dent in their fender. They go there and they'll buy an old fender and they'll slap it on the car. And that's fine. But what happens is those salvage yards have to give someone payment for that car. And usually the cars aren't worth much. But if they know a guy that steals cars and from time to time will bring a brand new car in there, and they'll take it apart and pay some guy $500 or $200 for a brand new Honda Accord or Toyota Corolla, they're going to make their money 40-fold, 50-fold on the parts for that car. So
Right.
sometimes it was someone just taking in a stolen car. Other times they would actively send out guys with a shopping list. I need this, I need this, I need this. Then you have the clandestine places. Those are the guys, they're the more difficult because they're in back of someone's house. Someone owns a private residence, and in the back of the house, they have a 2-car garage or a 1-car garage or a canopy
Mhm.
where you can't see behind. And they'll bring
Mhm.
a stolen car in there, and they'll take it apart and they'll chop up the frame of the car. We call that the bones. And then they'll sell the parts, and then they'll call a junkyard guy. We call that a bones truck. He'll show up and he'll put all the crap in there that nobody wants, and he'll take it to a scrap metal processor. It's almost like when something dies and the animals just kind of pick it apart, and then the vultures are
Yeah.
the last ones to come
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
take the
Yeah.
carcass apart. So, I mean, it's really, and sometimes it's not even in the back of a garage. We used to, in New York, you have all these highways that back up to like a wooded area. What these
Yeah.
guys would do is sometimes unbolt the guardrails and take the guardrail off and drive a car maybe 50, 100 feet into the woods, put the guardrail back. And, at night or in the daytime in the woods, they would take these cars apart. And we would sometimes park or walk through the woods, and it was like finding a lost civilization of,
Oh
you know,
my God.
you'd see like, people's old golf bags and stuff because, these guys aren't interested in that. So you would
Right.
find like mail that was in someone's car. And you'd follow a trail of crap, and you'd find all these cars like in various stages of being, dismantled.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And I'm so glad you described all that because I just thought shops were just the stolen parts, but I did not realize it was a whole ecosystem. It's
Yes.
a whole ecosystem,
Oh
you
yeah, and then
know?
you have the thieves, and there's different types of thieves. You have the teenagers. The lower on the frame of things is the teenagers and drug addicts. A teenager will steal a car just to get around. He's going to steal a car to show up at high school and be, the badass, or take his girlfriend to the movie, or drive around with his friends.
Mm,
Then you have
correct.
drug addicts. They'll steal a car because they use it to get around. They'll get it. Some of them are homeless. They'll steal the car and then they'll go into a park and get high for a couple of hours, and they'll hold on to that car forever. Those are usually the easy ones to catch because they've had the car so long and it's stolen. They're not taking care of it. It's filthy. They might have those stickers on the window, "You are illegally parked." Those little
Right.
bogus spare tires that you get that you're only supposed to go 40 miles after you get a flat. They'll drive it forever until it falls off the side of the car. So they're kind of easy to
Yes.
spot. The more
Right.
difficult ones are the pros, and there's different levels of professional car thieves. You have the ones that, they know how to steal. They'll stop by a junkyard. Hey, Anthony, you need anything? Yeah, you know what? I could use a Honda Accord. Okay. And they're doing it
Right.
for a couple of $100. Then you have the pros that are in with organized rings. And I mean, that's their
Yes.
full-time job from the moment they get
Yes.
up till the time they go to sleep. 4 or 5
Yes.
days a week. They're out from 7, 8 o'clock at night till 1, 2 in the morning, and they're out stealing a couple of cars a night.
Whoo, boy, that's a hell of a way to make a living. My goodness. Wow.
Well, they don't keep
Well,
regular hours and they don't pay taxes.
I guess, but like I said, it's just the whole structured thing that I don't think a lot of people realize just how structured it is. Now, what's the biggest bust you've ever done as a New York police officer?
I worked on a case in the auto crime division where we had a couple of guys, Chinese nationals. They set up shop in Brooklyn, and they were shipping 30 stolen vehicles a month to Shanghai. And so you had the guys in Brooklyn, like the businessmen. One of the guys hooked up with a Jamaican guy from the Bronx, and the Jamaican guy from the Bronx knew the car world, and the Jamaican guy from the Bronx knew all these car thieves. So the Asians would pay the Jamaican guy $5,000 a car. The Jamaican guy would farm out to his steel crews between 500 and $1,000 a car. They would steal 4 or 5 cars at a time. They'd park them in the street. They'd let them cool off to make sure they didn't have low jack or a navigation system. Once they were confident that the cars were clean, they would go to this warehouse in Brooklyn, 7, 8 in the morning when there's, rush hour traffic, people going to work, doesn't look out of the ordinary. It's not like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's, during business hours.
Right.
The Chinese guys would open up the garage, 2, 3 stolen cars would go in, the door would shut. Inside, they'd have a shipping container. They'd drive 2 stolen Audis per shipping container. They'd let the air out of the tires so the vehicle would sit low in the shipping container. Then they would build a frame above it with chains and wood, and then they would put another 1 or 2 cars above it so they could maximize the container. So usually between 3 and 4 stolen cars would go in a shipping container.
Oh.
Then they would have a company from New Jersey truck the container with the stolen vehicles out to Newark, New Jersey. They were put on trains, and they were railed across the United States to Long Beach, California. And then they were loaded on cargo ships, and they were shipped to Shanghai. And this was going on for years before we even found out about it. And we were on them for about a year before the case got taken down. But what was unusual about this case, we had multiple wiretaps up. So we had Chinese detectives from the NYPD monitoring the bosses. We had wiretaps on the Jamaican middleman, and then we had wiretaps on the thieves. And what we quickly learned was the thieves, in addition to being prolific at stealing cars, were in the murder for hire business. So this guy started bragging about whacking this guy, and this guy doesn't watch his mouth. He's going to get killed. So when we finally took down that case and broke up this international auto theft ring, we solved between 13 and 15 homicides because these guys were bragging about them. And one of the main thieves, although he didn't pull the trigger, he provided the logistics and was the getaway driver in a lot of the homicides. So he didn't want to go to jail for the rest of his life. So immediately he flipped. He wound up getting about 10 years, but he gave us a whole bunch of homicides. So
oh my
yeah,
God.
that was probably the biggest case I worked on. But yeah,
That was
30 cars a month.
huge.
Yeah.
That was huge. Now, I do have a remaining question about that bust. So why Shanghai? What would happen in Shanghai once the cars they just would go to a legitimate car dealership, or what happened over there?
The order for the cars was very specific. They had to be Audis, A6, and silver and black. And we couldn't figure it out. We're like, what are they, Raider fans? And a couple of times the thieves stole like a green one or a red one. And on the wiretap, the main guy got mad and says, I'm not paying for this. I don't want it. I told you silver and black. So we surmise it probably was going to government officials over there, that those were the cars they were allowed to drive. So it was a big, sophisticated, backed with a lot of money. You know what I mean? I mean, you're paying $5,000 a car, right? And you're renting this large garage. I mean, it was a very big garage. It was like a factory almost. Right. And, it's phones and rent and everything else. I mean, this was very sophisticated.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was huge. I'll be thinking about this, a little bit all day today, just thinking about
If you want to read
the
more
link.
about it, if you want to read more about it, you can if you Google, there's a New York Post article that wrote about it. It's called if you Google China's biggest wheel, it's a story
Okay.
about one of the hitmen in the case, and it goes into the auto theft, smuggling, and then the homicides.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well, okay, so with something that serious, that was the whole auto thing, and then it turned into you guys getting the murder for hires information. So serious, so much serious work. Then tell me, how do you get the humor out of being a New York police officer?
Well, I can tell you about that bust was funny because once we took the case down, we had to round up all these guys and literally in a couple of hours because what wound up happening is one of the stolen cars went into this garage that had a low jack, and the local precinct cops had no idea this was going on in their backyard, and they went running in there. And then all of a sudden the phones blew up because now everybody's like, oh crap, they know about it. Everybody's running in different directions. So we had to round up all these people in a couple of
Mhm.
hours. And once we were able to get most of them, then we got the rest later on. But once we got most of them, I'll tell you a funny story. So we're in this warehouse the following
Mhm.
day or the day after, and we're just looking around and stuff. And inside this garage, there's so much stuff because these guys were not interested in what was in your car. I mean, you could have a Fabergé egg or a Lennox China, and they didn't care. They wanted the car. Like they were just dumping stuff in like a dumpster.
Right,
And
right.
it's this large garage. And I remember one of the detectives found a bowling ball, and it's a large concrete garage. I mean, like 100 feet long. And one of the detectives took a bowling ball and just shot it across a concrete floor. And another detective comes walking out of an office, and we're like, look out. And the guy at the last possible second, the bowling ball almost took him down like a pin. He just jumped up out of the way. So we were screwing around with that stuff. We found fire extinguishers. There was another guy in an office. We shoved the fire extinguisher in there and started filling the room up. And he's on the phone and he turns like, oh, and he had to run out of the room. So definitely have a sense of humor. Um, we're always playing practical jokes on each other. I like to tell the story when I worked in uniform, we'd wait till two cops went into the precinct for an hour to get their lunch hour or meal hour. And
Mhm.
in the summertime, we would take the air vents out of the air conditioning system of the police car and pour cornstarch down the holes and put the vents back with the AC on full blast. You get two guys get into the car and they start it up and poof, in those navy blue uniforms, they're covered. They look like they worked in a bakery, and then they had to go back downstairs and get changed. There was another guy who wasn't too popular in the precinct. This is a million years ago. And when Rogaine first came out, this guy was balding, and he made the mistake of leaving his locker open with a bottle of Rogaine up there. And two
Oh
guys
my
I know emptied the contents of the Rogaine out of the bottle and filled it out with wood stain or varnish. And then the guy starts putting it on his head, and he stained the top of his head. He went ballistic. Like they had to restrain him from killing the other two guys that did this to him. So yeah, there is a lot of screwing around behind the scenes.
Yeah,
A precinct
yeah.
specialized unit.
Yes. Well, I guess for something so serious that and you never know what a police officer day is going to look like. It could be calm and normal and average and ordinary, and then it could be something like 911. And so tell me about that. I know there's a lot of humor. That's a great release, a mental health release. But you were a cop during 911, correct?
Oh yeah, I was a detective. I was sitting in my office and literally would save my life. I was supposed to have court that day, a couple of blocks from the courthouse,
Mm-hmm.
and my sergeant was running late. The two of us had to attend court, and I'm on him. Come on, we got to leave. We got to leave. We got to get down to Manhattan. And the first plane hit, and then we put on the television. We were watching like everyone else. The second plane hit. They told us to get into uniform, and I thought that day I was going to go down to court and sign up a confidential informant, and I wound up, you know, walking around America's largest crime scene. I was down there from 1:30 in the afternoon till about 5:30 at night. And I was there the whole week actually, and spent a lot of time down there. And then at the dump, when they were bringing all the salvage cars down there, they had us chopping them open to see if anyone had perished inside any of these crushed cars. Um, like you
Oh,
said, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, there is so many. You can't plan anything as a cop in New York because you think you're
yeah.
going to go home at 3 o'clock, and you get stuck with an arrest, or you're at a crime scene, or it's it's not like you work in a bank or Department of Motor Vehicles. Well, I'm going to go. Like, Deirdre, can you stay for me? I mean, sometimes you can do that, but it's far and few between. It's like you're locked in.
Right, right. Most definitely, most definitely. Well, that was an extremely sad day in America. And it just that was another whole thing, almost kind of like on a different level, like the pandemic, these things that can just be so huge and happen, and you just have to figure out how did this occur? How do we pick up the pieces? And I know the NYPD and the fire department, you guys were definitely heroes during that horrible, horrible time. Did you find that a lot of cops resigned after 911?
No. There I again, it's such a large police department. You hear stories about guys and girls who didn't handle it well and,
Yeah.
as a result were surveyed off the job, but that was kind of far and few between.
Hmm.
Um, by the time that 9/11 happened, I had 13 or 14 years on the job.
Right.
So I had been exposed to so many things that I mean, you learn to compartmentalize things. You say, "All right,
Yeah.
this is really bad, but I just can't go to pieces. I have a job to do. This is
Right.
this is my existence. This is my job. I have to do this."
Right. Right.
I don't remember too many people resigning. I didn't know anyone personal that resigned as a result of it, but I did hear stories about people that didn't handle it well and as a result
Yeah.
had to resign.
Right. Well, most definitely. So why did you retire and how did you get into the writing?
I like to equate a 20-year career with the New York City Police Department is a merry-go-round ride, and it's great
Okay.
that you got your ups, you got your downs. There's a lot
Right.
going on in the background, but if you stay too long, the horse is going to throw you on your head.
Yeah.
Everybody outlives their usefulness in a
Yeah.
job or corporation. And I saw the writing on the wall as far as the unit I was in. People were leaving, new people were coming in. At 41 years old, I was considered to be old.
Yeah.
And, I had seen other guys that had hung around too long and their opinion wasn't valued, or, they
Yeah.
became dinosaurs. They were used to doing things a certain way and it didn't turn out very well for them. And I
Yeah.
said, I'm young enough. I'm 41 years old. I can retire with a pension and I can do
Mhm.
something else.
Right.
And that's what I did. I wasn't counting the days to retirement, but at the same time, I had to really think long and hard because I had never thought about retirement up until about a year or two before I got out. And then I was like, oh wow, this is real. Like I had
Right.
some people take the job and they're like, I only got 3 years left. I only got 2 years left. I
Yeah.
wasn't one that counted my life away. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I realized all of a sudden, like, wow, this is going to be life changing for me, and it was. And
Yeah.
once you get off that merry-go-round, you've got to find something to fill your time. You've got to find your purpose. You've got to, you'll become stagnant if you don't.
Right.
Your mind
Most
is a
definitely.
muscle, and and
Yeah.
and you have to exercise it. And I got into writing, and I
Mhm.
started writing these NYPD themed books about the characters, the interesting characters I worked with, clever criminals, the stories I was telling you, things you would never think about what goes on behind the scenes in a police station with the practical jokes and the
Right.
characters and just how the department works, and a lot of
Right.
famous stories that the average person wouldn't know, but has happened in the NYPD. And it's kind of
Yes.
become a cottage industry for me because now I'm going on podcasts and radio shows and people like yourself that are nice enough to put me on your forums to promote my books. It's just kind of turned into a full-time job. I love it.
Yes. Well, right there in between retirement from the NYPD and then to becoming a writer, did you go to writers' workshops? How did that all transpire? Or
To
you
quote
just started?
No, to quote my late lieutenant, I don't work well with others. Um, and listen, I know my strengths and weaknesses, and one of my weaknesses is I was never a student. I got out of Catholic high school by the skin of my teeth. The police academy I did not particularly enjoy. I just, I never took a creative writing class. I did know I could write because a couple of my supervisors during my career, especially as a detective, you've got to write these long forms, these DD5s, and they're who, what, where, when, why.
Right.
It's not like when you're on patrol, it's bullet points. And I remember hearing my lieutenants and sergeants laughing in the next room reviewing my fives, and they would bring one back and go, I love it. It's funny. They're not going to think this is funny if somebody reads this downtown. It's overly sarcastic. Take out some of the adjectives. And I was like, all right. But I continue to do it to get a laugh out of them, knowing damn well that I would have to redo this. I would save it on, I'm dating myself, on my word processor. So I knew I could write to a degree. And I says, well, it's like anything else. The first couple of times is going to be tough. But if I keep at it, I'm going to learn and I'm going to get better at it. And, so far, so good. 90% of my reviews are really good. And, it's taken off for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, a little bit. I think that's some of that New York confidence that I know so famously. Some of
You're
that's
married to a New Yorker, so right?
yes, yes, I know where that's coming from. Oh my goodness. Well, so are you self-published or are you backed by one of the big five, hybrid publishing? How do you do that?
No, I'm backed by me. So when I got into writing, right, I'm
Yeah.
getting close to getting this manuscript together, and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
And as you've probably already figured out, I'm not a patient person. And I said, I don't know if I can send my manuscript out to 30 or 40 different people in hopes that someone's going to pick this up and go, yeah, we're going to give you a small advance and let's see where this goes.
Right.
I said to myself, I'm already going to have a partner with Amazon or whoever is going to print these things or put it in ebook. Let me see if I can do it myself. And it's funny, if you Google, like, you're a first time writer and you want to self-publish, there's all these companies. Give us $5, give us $10,000. We're going to do this for you. We're going to give you a ghostwriter. We're going to market it. I said, you know what? I think I can do this myself. And I think the most important thing, the two most important things about being a self-published author is the book cover and the editing. And people always take that cheap route with a book cover. And unfortunately, people do choose a book by its cover. It's like going to a bottle of wine in a store. You see something funny or something catchy. You know nothing about this bottle of wine, but you go, that's actually pretty clever. I'm gonna try it.
Right. Just the way I tried cupcake wine. Just for the cupcake.
I tried a bottle of Freak Show, and it's got all this crap in it, like circus performers and people eating fire. I was like, I'll give it a shot. It's $10, and that's one. The book cover, people skip on the book cover. I found this great company in Canada called Ebook Launch, and for $500, they give you a professional book cover. Like we were just talking about auto theft and stuff. So here's Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division, and you got a picture of a car getting chopped. Right.
Yeah.
And then on the back to do a nice jacket, right?
Yes.
$500 and you will get your money back what you put into it. Another thing is the editing. If you have to spend the money for a good copy edit, you send your manuscript out, they're going to send it back with all these little red changes on it. Think back to when you were in school and you got your term paper back and the teacher wrote on it with a red pen. They're not, they're just highlighting, and you can accept those changes or deny those changes. Once you go through that, you send it back for a copy, proofread. Proofread cleans up everything else. And for me, all in on a self-published book, including the formatting, is $2,500.
Oh, that's reasonable. That's reasonable. Definitely reasonable. I like that a lot. Well, Vic, I certainly have enjoyed my time with you today. You have opened my eyes, and I know you're going to open up a lot of the listeners and viewers' eyes about what it is to be a New York police officer. And everything is not always so dead serious. You just had me laughing on a lot of different places here. I think this is the most podcast that I've laughed the most out of all the podcasts I've done, and that's maybe now nearing 60 podcasts. And you had me laughing on such what is a serious career. So definitely, we're going to have all of your contact information, your social media handles, books, how to obtain your books in the podcast show notes, as well as in the video description box on my YouTube channel.
Thank you, Deidre. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Vic. We appreciate you and what you're doing to bring about just another vision of being a police officer. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.